Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Founder Files. Today I've got another special treat for you in the last mile delivery space, and that is the founder of WumDrop, Simon Hartley. Now, if you haven't heard of WumDrop, WumDrop is the biggest last mile on-demand delivery service in Africa. They were fully acquired by MassMart in July 2021, and between now and April 2024, well, between then and April 2024, Simon has been on his earnout period, and since then has been living the post-exit life. So throughout the story, you're going to hear everything from the founding and origin stories of an entrepreneur through what it's like in terms of post-exit. So you're going to get the full story now. But more specifically, what we get into detail today is that founding story and how they changed from being a retailer themselves in the B2C space to pivoting to being a delivery service in the B2B space and how that managed to unlock their first growth and product market fit. He also explains his competitive advantage and how they were able to succeed in such a competitive arena in the first place, being within the logistics and last mile delivery. He then gives quite a detailed account of the challenges of hitting scale and needing to invest in technology and raising funding for the first time, having to deploy that properly, and just the changes that meant for him as an entrepreneur and for the business. And with that is just a very honest, detailed account of this scaling period and how the threat of burnout was always looming and how it actually happened and how the loss of customers and quality was really struggling as demand was increasing. After that, he also explains how they were acquired by MassMart at quite a critical juncture in the business's journey and what that managed to change for Simon and for the business. And now there's a whole new chapter that unlocks in his story and how he had to level up as a leader and what he learned about the difference between leadership and management, what he learned about being teachable and coachable, and stories about how he had to go about redesigning the business and hiring his next level of leadership. Also, stories around dealing with a corporate for the first time, how managing with different stakeholders and the political complexities of that now being within a corporate environment. So obviously, whether you are servicing corporates or partnering with corporates, this is full of so much gold of someone who really climbed the ranks in a corporate starting off as an acquisition. And finally, through that is his experience of the 3-year earnout period within MassMart and all that he learned there as an entrepreneur, as a leader, and a corporate employee, etc. This episode is a podcast of pure gold in terms of everything from what it's like starting out, the identity of a founder, the psychological changes he went through, everything that he learned as a leader, what changed for him in his business, how he had to navigate corporate and now navigating, post-exit life in this chapter now. So this is an unbelievable episode filled with such gold and such content. And if you want to make sure that you're not going to miss another episode like this from founders like Simon Hartley of WumDrop, then you really want to make sure that you are following the Founder Files. If it's too long, can't listen, follow us on social media. Check out LinkedIn, Instagram, or TikTok to make sure that you're getting all of these absolute nuggets of wisdom and gold from founders like Simon. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Simon Hartley. Welcome to the Founder Files, the podcast that's like eavesdropping on a conversation with a successful entrepreneur over a fireside chat. Join me, Cameron Coots, through this unique experience of unfiltered stories and insights from scaling founders around the globe as they share their ups, downs, and everything in between. Simon Hartley, welcome to the Founder Files. It's great to have you here. I'm quite jealous of your background. I mean, I put a fair amount of effort into mine, and you've put a fair amount of effort into the placement of where you are to have a background like yours, which I think is fantastic. But yeah, welcome to the Founder Files. I can't wait to get into your story.
Thank you, Cam. Thank you for having me. Your background is slightly greener than mine at the moment because the rain has not yet come, but it's still good. Yeah, I dig it. Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. Good to have you here. So, Simon, just to get straight into it, I mean, if anybody in the audience hasn't heard of WumDrop, WumDrop is a successful last mile delivery platform that was exited to MassMart back in the day, and Simon's exited properly, and that's why he's sitting in the bush living his best life right now. But I guess just to unpack it and help us understand it, because last mile delivery is that's an industry within itself. So can you just explain the business and the business model that was WumDrop, that is WumDrop?
So we'll probably get into the genesis of how the thing started way back in the beginning, but I've got a story brain, so apologies to listeners if there's always a lot of context for my answers. We started trying to sell things. I started a business when I was 24, 25, selling diapers online. And pretty quickly realized that the fulfillment part, the getting the stuff to the customer, was the hard part. And that was primarily functional of the fact that we were poor and had no capital and therefore had to sell online because we didn't have space to rent a shop. So we delivered to people and realized that was a really tough experience, both for ourselves as complete noobs who were ignorant of how to deliver and didn't have any logistics experience or degrees or training of any kind. And it was incredibly frustrating for the end user for the consumer who was getting the thing. Because the incumbent standard for deliveries at the time, and to some extent still today, was you will get the delivery at some point in the next 3 days, and you will get it at some point between 9 and 5, which means pretty much for 3 days, or at the very least for a day, you're kind of beholden to the route of the delivery guy without any insight into when he's going to be there or what his route might look like, which is bad, by the way, because they actually know what their route looks like and could probably give you some kind of estimation. But realized that was the hard part, and that's where the opportunity was. So pivoted into a delivery as a service business to try to solve that problem, because we realized that was not a big opportunity from a market, addressable market point of view. Retail is obviously always going to be huge from a revenue point of view because it's the top end of the funnel, right? But realized that in terms of an opportunity that confident noobs could probably attack, that this was a space we could have a go at. And so we spun up a delivery as a service business, which is the beginning of me answering your question about what the model is. Delivery as a service business is a business that is a help to retailers and other enterprise businesses to get goods from point A to B, but specifically the final point from collection to B being the consumer, the end user. And while that sounds overly niche to someone who doesn't care to know all the ins and outs of logistics, which I completely get, by the way, it's super fascinating if you're into it, but it is otherwise dry as dust if you're not. There are numerous points in the fulfillment journey that don't include final mile, and it's a complex and scientific field, and folks do approach it as a science. And that final piece we felt was neglected. So what we did was sell a service that would collect from point A to point B to be able to plug into enterprise businesses through a JSON REST API. Why JSON REST? Well, it was really cheap and simple to build, and see previous notes about us being poor. So basically, we would bill a company per delivery to do a delivery for them in their name. So me, Simon, or you, Cameron, to use MassMart as an example, might believe that we're getting a macro delivery, but macro is contracting with WumDrop or any other courier really to fulfill that delivery. And you as a customer, you only care about your relationship with macro. How they get it to you is not your really concern. So what that means for macro is that you as the delivery company essentially are owning their customer experience for a little while, which makes the handoff fairly fraught, and means that while they do care greatly because they're retailers about cost and driving costs down, they also equally deeply care about their customers' experience. And so if you're a final mile delivery company, that shows in your DNA that you really care about the end user's experience, you can get the attention of enterprise businesses, which is, I think, how we got a foothold in the space, despite being complete amateurs without any experience in logistics. We were super highly qualified consumers who cared deeply about the experience, and that was always at the forefront of what we talked about in the beginning, and still to this day, I guess.
And I mean, that also speaks a bit to your founding journey and the pivots that you went through, which we'll get into now, is the fact that you were you experienced that problem firsthand yourself in terms of when you were trying to sell direct to consumer and having delivery partners. It's the customer experience that was probably one of the biggest challenges. And essentially, you ended up realizing how big of an issue that was, and then started solving that for other people. And I definitely want to hear that in a bit more depth. But I think I want to get a little bit more of an understanding of this, is because, talking about the science of last mile delivery, I mean, this is where businesses like Loop come into play and do an excellent job of trying to optimize last mile, and I think doing a great job of it. I'm really just trying to understand this point of delivery of it as a service business, because anyone who thinks or knows of WumDrop, thinks of a tech business, not a logistics company, right? If you will, even though it's still within the same space. So I also want to understand, like, to give this a point of reference, who would you say WumDrop's biggest competitors are? Would it be like the courier guy, or would it be, what's the options available there?
And just on that note, if people would think of WumDrop as a tech business in terms of how the business was priced when we first raised money in the very beginning, I would have absolutely loved to have more successfully positioned it as a tech business instead of a logistics business, because, oh boy, that multiple is nicer. But it is a technology-enabled business. Not to sound like let's make everybody's eyes roll. But the meat and potatoes is eventually like a physical transaction, right? A handoff of a parcel. So at the end of the day, it is not a pure software or SaaS or tech business. So in terms of who our competitors are, direct competitors in the market at the moment, the courier guy is absolutely the incumbent market leader. They have reached a level of scale, and you'll hear me say the word density a lot probably in this interview. Reached a level of scale and density which unlocks incredibly sustainable unit economics for them. So I'm going to go into the unit ecos quickly for everybody, because it'll probably lay the groundwork fairly helpfully. In South Africa, we don't really have the final mile so much as the final 14 kilometers. We are an enormous country, geographically speaking. We have the same population as the United Kingdom, but 5 times the land. So distances are enormous. So if you've spent any time in London and you've had something delivered from, I don't know, Asda or Aldi or something, it's a delightful experience because the country is so incredibly dense. Even in the rural areas, you can't drive more than 60 for more than 1 kilometer because you keep going from village to village. And that means that a delivery company can build very, very, very dense routes. So you've got delivery vehicle, right? And in a given day, delivery vehicle drives X kilometers. And that is more or less going to be true for every day on an average. So if you pull that out to a month or a week, every day is going to be pretty similar with some minor fluctuations. That means that delivery vehicle has a fairly predictable cost in terms of fuel and running costs before you even look at personnel. So you can P&L this into basically what is the cost of a delivery machine, including person and vehicle per month. And you can break it down either into the units of distance or transactions, deliveries. So if that cost is fairly predictable, it's not a fixed cost, obviously, but you can start to think about it in a fixed cost way, which means you can, if you make it a fixed cost, like if you pay, for example, somebody a sustainable salary instead of paying them per transaction, per delivery, it benefits you to give that person more work or to make them productive. This is Ecos 101, which means in countries where you can drive less and do more, you get a fatter margin per transaction, per delivery, right? You're paying less as the provider per delivery, but you can keep the charge the same or make it slightly lower, but you still have a fatter margin than your competitors who are probably having to drive the same distance because the same centers are the same distance from the warehouses, but are doing less work, but are still paying relatively similar numbers because people have minimum needs in terms of what they need to be able to eat and show up to work and so on.
Density then is the same, simply number of transactions divided by distance.
Exactly. So the courier guy has, by virtue of being an incumbent for a long time, but also by dint of generally great service and also incredibly strong marketing over the last couple of years and some smart partnerships, has created a super defensible position where they have really, really high density per delivery. The maximum number of deliveries a driver can do in the last mile per day in South Africa is about 40. That's incredibly busy. But you can also double tap that with collections too, which they also charge for. So if you hit the right ecosystem where, for example, you are delivering to marketplace buyers, but also collecting from marketplace sellers will often have returns and going back to a warehouse, or buyers will have returns going back to a seller. You can charge for a delivery and collect something at the same time. So you have 40 productive transactions, but you have 80 transactional moments in that day. And that's basically what they've been able to get to. A human can't really do more than 40 a day because they'll just exhaust themselves if you do an average of between 7.5 minutes and 15 minutes per delivery, which is the case in South Africa.
Yeah, I mean, that's it's an average of 5 an hour.
Yeah, it's, as we say in the business, cuck fast. So that's where they've gotten to. And that means that they can charge, they've got the fattest margin for whatever they charge, basically. And they have the ability to get into a price war with somebody who's spending capital to acquire the market. The difference is that they're funding it from their margin instead of burning cash, which is obviously a better place to be in a country where capital is so expensive, like South Africa. So they're definitely everybody's biggest competitor. They're just the gorilla at the moment. And then in terms of specialist niche final mile businesses, Pickup is a business that started after us, but has done a really good job, especially in the smaller parcels on motorcycles. They've carved themselves a nice niche there. And then I would say, kind of to sprinkle some zest on the answer, we also, the competitors that we are competing with are also our potential clients or actual clients' current owned network. Because we're a delivery as a service, many clients will that we're pitching to will already have their own network. And that network will have a multi-year contract to it. So it'll be either rent to own or a fixed utility contract with somebody like Imperial, for example, or they'll have their own vehicles that they've bought that they're writing down on their books. And that's generally locked in for a couple of years. But there are conversations every year with whether they decide whether to extend that contract or not. And that's difficult for two reasons. One, the sums involved are enormous, so it's a big call to abandon that kind of contract. And two, it's like most things in business, it's often tied to somebody's personal career trajectory. Someone has made a big call at some point to say we need to invest in this particular thing. And it takes a skilled corporate politician to be able to be the person to say, I was the one that vouched for this thing, but I now believe that we should vouch for something else, which is this more agile, lighter footprint solution, and that will be as good and reliably retain their credibility. And so classic.
Interesting. You just also summarized a massive difference, a massive inherent difference between entrepreneurs and people in corporate is like, obviously it's the politics involved, but it's the power and authority. As an entrepreneur, it's like my business, right? I can completely own it. I messed that up, but everyone knows like I mess up everything on this journey. That's how we learn as entrepreneurs. But in a corporate situation, you need to be so politically careful around owning a mistake and pivoting because it's going to come down on you as on your job. Whilst as the entrepreneur, it's like this is not new for me. This is what I've done my whole career.
Yeah, real or perceived credibility is incredibly important. And if you are selling something to someone whose real or perceived credibility is on the line with that decision, and you aren't aware of that, at best you're going to get lucky with the sale. You have to be thinking about that, especially when you're dealing with enterprise or corporate clients.
It's 100%. And this makes me think of a lot of what I've spoken to our clients when they're looking at targeting corporates, and specifically when we do like market segmentation and customer segmentation. It's kind of that one level deeper, especially when you're targeting a corporate, this is where you need to understand the buyer. You need to understand their motivations and their jobs, and also kind of where they sit within a hierarchy. And it's about how is it that you can also predict what the needs of the person's job are above that. Right. So if they're in the head of procurement reporting to the CFO, you need to think about what's going to be important to the CFO and help the head of procurement do their job as a priority to the CFO, and then you'll get the deal. You can't just look at as a procurement function and what's going to make more sense there if that's not a priority to making that person politically stand out to the person that's above them. And that's also why it's so hard in enterprise deals, is that the number of like ideal customer personas you have to have are like 8. For one sale, to understand all of these different people around and how you have got like different value propositions for the same thing just to benefit that person and their job.
I was one of those entrepreneurs that was so allergic. I actually have, you guys you're going to see me figure something out about myself in real time here because I haven't thought about this deeply. But I've always been one of those entrepreneurs that has been slightly allergic to sales in some way or found it icky. And I always got the ick whenever people talked about the need for networking without really like explaining why, or the need for relationship building, or the need for golf. We were joking about you having a pat meeting earlier, and that everything goes back to golf. But really what it is, the important nub of that is that if you don't build a relationship with someone to be able to understand what their social risks are inside the company, you won't be able to effectively navigate the structure of the deal in order to give them something that is both acceptably safe but also interesting and compelling. And that's why networking is important, not because Robin Sharma said so. Like it's important because it's important because to spend social capital, you have to know how and where to spend it. And to do that, you have to know someone. And for somebody to feel safe to tell you about themselves, it generally can't be on a call where one of their peers or their boss is listening. It's got to be in some kind of safe space where it's face-to-face, probably.
100%. And look, on the points of motivation for networking and selling, I can resonate with what you've said a lot, because one of the biggest difficulties for me is I'm very transparent, right? So it means that I can't be disingenuous or false, because it actually makes me feel emotionally uncomfortable to try and be a secondhand car salesman, if you will. So the point there, like for me, is that in terms of and this is, I guess, helpful being trained as a psychologist, I just have a very, at my core, natural fascination of human beings and understanding their world and worldview. So in any kind of like approach is like that's why I don't think I could ever be in a B2C business myself personally, because now I'm being in a B2B space is that it's like the relationship building, the empathy building, the understanding of someone is because I find every single human being fascinating and interesting and having their own unique experiences. And what I find is by me naturally being myself and naturally doing that, I end up networking, I end up selling, I end up doing this, because it's like people aren't used to the experience of having someone just so interested in their worldview in life. And the thing is, it's like, I'm not even trying to sell you. It's just I'm just interested in humans, and you are a human, and that's all it is.
That completely resonates, and I'm sure it resonates with all of the listeners too, given the profile of people who listen to this. And to tie the point of myself, that anything that's strayed away from that kind of mission storytelling that you've just touched on for your own thing, frustrated me and felt like a waste of time, and felt like bullshit. And I was born like 100-year-old man, and I've got a very obvious like kind of grumpy face. And so unless I'm excited about engaging in the mission and solving the problem, and then I'm extremely excited and super interested and clued in and animated, I don't do well with someone who I'm not keyed in with immediately, like over like if I'm standing there with a glass of white wine at an event, and this person's trying to tell me about something that I think is nonsense, my face doesn't do well to hide it, which is not a virtue. It's just how I am. No, I wish I could work it out.
I'm the same. To be honest, it's kind of it's strength and a weakness are the same side of the same coin. Sometimes, in terms of within our control, the way I view it is that a weakness is simply a strength pushed too far. So in that situation, it's beautiful because there's a lot of authenticity in how we utilize this, and it's about like being able to be genuine, be authentic. Means that when we are engaged, well, at least speaking of myself, I'm incredibly joyful. I'm kind of all in. But if I'm not, then I kind of struggle. Regulating that's another challenge. But right, as much as I could love to talk about this psychology and our own psychology of being founders, I want to pull this back to WumDrop. So you've given us a sense of the business and where the business, how the business essentially works, understanding compared to competitors, and that your niche and how I'd essentially explain it is that at least your competitive advantage is a white labeled delivery service that not only ensures but enhances the intended customer experience of your customer for their customers. And I think that's something that within the last mile delivery space is something that's very, very difficult to achieve. And it's something that's so important to all kinds of companies and brands. It's such a common theme in scaling journeys and being able to like maintain or enhance the customer experience. That's also why a lot of founders struggle to really let go and delegate and elevate themselves, because it's in their own business with their clients getting new employees that they can trust with the customer experience. It's a whole different kettle of fish when you're in your space and you're outsourcing delivery and the final customer interface and satisfaction outside. So it's such a critical thing that you were able to solve. I obviously want to get into the how part, but just the founding story, right? Because I mean, you didn't start there. You started a little bit further down the value chain and a bit closer to customers. So just talk to me about how WumDrop essentially started as a business and found its way to being the business model that it is today.
So this is where the apology to the listeners earlier about context comes back in, because I'm going to start when I was 11, which is not when the business started, but it's foundational. So my dad had a car sound and security company when I was a kid. I was the youngest of 3 siblings, 2 older sisters, and it was really successful. When Toyota began putting car sound and security in their vehicles in 2000, 2001, it hit him for 6. And there's a lot of extra detail in there, but for the sake of moving the story forward, his business failed. And we went through some dramatic changes financially as a family. So from being the family that would take spontaneous holidays and dad would spontaneously rock up with fun cars and that kind of thing, we became the family that had the sheriff coming around. The doorbell was disconnected from the wall. It was a super bewildering time as a kid with a kid brain. And at least in my mind, in my 11-year-old mind, how I conceived of it is that we lost everything. Now, just to be totally clear, as an adult, I don't believe that we lost everything. You know, my parents still live in the same house. I ended up going to a private school. So did my sisters. They stayed in a private school because we had a network, a community of people who could help us, including my grandparents, who were very financially stable. And so we were, you know, classically white people in South Africa, fine.
As you said offline, you were white people poor.
Exactly. Yeah. Like I've never gone to bed hungry in my life, but I've gone to bed afraid as a kid, because you know your experience is not your experience of reality is not necessarily 100% accurate, and that's especially true when you're a kid and you can't regulate your emotions as well as an adult. Especially if you're an adult that's going to end up with an ADHD brain where you can't regulate your emotions as well as other adults anyway. So who's that? We're not talking about me.
No, we're not talking about me either.
No. So yeah, 11-year-old me believes suddenly that everything that you have can disappear. So I became incredibly motivated from a really young age, from 11 or 12, to make my own way, to make my own money, for the sake of security, to be able to secure my own and my family's well-being, really, to be a success. I've always been a very wordy person. I've loved writing since I was really little. I love telling stories, and my cousin Will, in particular, he's my older cousin, and my cousin is very much like my siblings. So he was a role model for me. He's also always been a great writer and was doing a lot of freelance writing to earn his own cash. He was 6 years older than me. Ended school, was extremely keen to get into university because I don't think I thought it through properly, but I decided I needed a degree. Definitely my grandparents and my parents wanted me to have a degree as well. But I was totally fine with that. I believed I needed one. So I did a degree that I could get through quickly and do really well, and also make money on the side. Basically, I wanted as much free time to make money as possible. So I did a BA in media, television, script writing at UCT. And I got bursaries and scholarships and stuff for that too. So essentially I was getting paid by the university. So this was all gravy, right? So like I was getting a degree, I was getting paid for it. And I was making money on the side, writing TV scripts and carrying on freelance writing. Then after that, I was extremely keen to get into the business world, to get working, to get a job, to keep on fulfilling this need to be stable financially. And I got a job at a burgeoning media business. I was still very young at this stage. I think I was 21, 22. And I spent 2 to 3 years there. But because it was burgeoning, I was basically employee number one. So I was given a lot of management, in retrospect, management duty without me knowing what management was or how it worked. And I learned about the business, and I learned the business model and the unity codes. And I got to a point where in my extremely smart 24, 25-year-old brain full of wisdom, I decided that my boss wasn't running the business very well, which, just to be completely clear, was a 24, 25-year-old's conception. Again, very similar to like the 11-year-old. What's true for you is not necessarily true, but it's how I felt, right? And so I believed that the business wasn't going to go to the stars, which is because of childhood fear, is where I needed it to go. And so I was going to make things happen myself, and I was going to start a business. Because I was impatient, I like the little catchphrase I've come up for myself in that period, and probably true in general, is that I was highly motivated but fundamentally lazy. So I was absolutely not going to go back to study a BCom in business. I was going to learn on the job, as it were. So a buddy of mine from TV scriptwriting, a guy called Roy Barole, he was also working at a media company, at a large advertising firm. And by coincidence, his company moved into the same office block as mine in Cape Town. And because I was kind of quietly quitting and becoming a poor employee, I was taking my 10-minute smoke breaks, even though I didn't smoke, but, legally mandated 20 minutes a day, right? So I would go to the smoking balcony and hang out there and just talk crap for 10 minutes to people and then come back. And one day I bumped into Roy there, who was a smoker, and he was smoking. And I said, how's it going? And he said, why are you on the smoking balcony? You don't smoke. I said, I'm not super happy where I am. And he said, wow, me too. And we, in that extremely, in that really youthful way that we lose as we become more serious and stifled people, we said, like, cool, let's start a business. Like, it was not, people are often baffled by that statement. Like, what do you mean? Let's just start a business. You didn't discuss further? Honestly, no. We are functioning from our lizard brains. We just said, let's start our own business, because clearly the people we work with don't know how to run businesses the way that we think they should be run. And so we said, great. Are we going to study a BCom? No. Okay, cool. How are we going to do this? Well, we're going to do something, and it's definitely going to fail. So what we're going to do is, what can we do? Well, we can sell, because Roy and I had both done TV script writing together. And if you do TV script writing, one of the things you've got to be able to do is to pitch. If you can't pitch, you can write Breaking Bad, but it's never going to get made, which, by the way, would be a tragedy for humankind if that had happened. But thank God, Vince Gilligan can talk. So we can pitch. Pitching is selling. So we can sell. Okay, great. We'll sell something. The business is going to fail, which means, for the sake of variables, we can't sell something that doesn't have product market fit, because it's definitely going to be our behavior and our choices that screw this up. So we've got to sell something that's definitely already got a place in the world. So we're going to sell, let's think what already is definitely always going to be needed. We're going to sell coffins. Okay, cool. Come back in the afternoon. I asked Roy how his day was. He said, kind of depressing. I said, mine too. And I said, was it the coffins? He said, yes. So we decided to go to the other end of the circle of life, being diapers, which are also always going to be needed. So, great. We now have an idea. We're going to sell diapers. How much money do we have? Well, Roy had about 7,000 Rand in savings. I had about 12. That's checks and notes, not a lot. So we don't have enough money for a deposit on a store. Roy is driving a Ford Fiesta. I've got myself a Ford Figo. So we say, okay, cool. There's the internet. We'll sell online and we'll deliver to people in our cars. So we did that. We had so little money that we couldn't pay for a URL, but we did have the kind of minimum constraint that we had to have a .com URL. So we downloaded a CSV of all available free .com URLs, and it basically just scrolled for an hour and a half looking for anything with syllables that somebody could enunciate, and eventually found one called wum.com. And we were like, okay, well, that's not terrible. I mean, that's better than all the others that we've seen so far, which is like qz59j2.com. So Wum sounds like it could be a brand, could be a thing. And Roy is a black guy from Joburg who, amongst 3 other languages, speaks Zulu. And Mtwana Wam in Zulu means my baby. So Mtwana Wam, cool, wumwum.com. That's great. So that's the name. Awesome. So we have a brand, we have a name, we have a website. We build a little thing in Shopify, and we are selling diapers, and we're off to the races. Now, fun side detail is the first place that we looked for stock was obviously the wholesalers, Kimberly-Clark and Procter & Gamble and so on. They told us to go fish because we had a credit record that was, kind of equivalent to a teenager's and no assets to speak of. And so the terms that they gave us were...
And 19 grand in the bank account that's already being spent.
Correct. The terms that they gave us were pretty bad. So we looked around for other places where we could get diapers. And one of them was Macro. Actually, one of the first places we looked was Macro, which is funny. There's a photograph of Roy standing in Macro artery with a 10-kilogram bag of bacon. We went looking for diapers and eventually got sidetracked by looking at 100-liter drums of mayonnaise, which I will never not be charmed by. Macro's prices were fine, but they weren't that amazing. But there was this company called Take A Lot, which had just kind of launched. This is 2013, 2014. And they were trying
to... quite a new company. Haven't heard of them before. Are they doing well?
Yeah, they're doing okay. I think they're recently profitable.
Okay, good for them.
Yeah. So they were trying to kill Kalahari.com at the time, which was, a thing. Remember them, rest in peace. And how they were trying to kill Kalahari is obviously Take A Lot is doing the Amazon everything store thing, and Kalahari was primarily doing media. And so Take A Lot would sell things like diapers at a loss, a massive loss, in order to do you might also like to buy, and then insert competitive product that Kalahari was selling, like the child rearing DVD, the baby book, whatever the case might be. And then that's how they were kind of pulling market share away from Kalahari, amongst a bunch of other stuff, which means that they were selling diapers for less money than what Procter & Gamble was offering us on a wholesale basis per unit. So we could buy piecemeal from Take A Lot, have it delivered to us, unbox, repackage, rebrand, and deliver it. And the way we got around this in terms of cash flow was we decided we'd be a subscription business for the sake of cash flow. So we would put out our prices, we would tell folks that we delivered, and we did by word of mouth initially to get first customers. And people would pay us on Monday and we would deliver on Thursday. So if they'd pay us on Monday, we'd buy on Tuesday from Take A Lot, we'd get it delivered to us on Wednesday, we'd repackage and deliver on Thursday. We got to about 100 customers, and we found that we could no longer do the deliveries ourselves in our Ford Figo and Ford Fiesta respectively. So we outsourced to different delivery companies. And as soon as we did that, and we tried this 3 or 4 times, with each delivery company, it would be good for the first week. And then after the first week of kind of hypercare, the number of clients that we had would start falling off. After the 3rd iteration of this, we started to panic, because when you have 100 customers of 10 leave, that's kind of a big big chunk of your customer base.
It's a big chunk.
At your point, at the point. So one smart thing that we did in retrospect was we talked to people who left, because we're small enough to be able to know each of these people are. And we went to...
because also the thing is, you were doing the deliveries yourself. I mean, it's this was...
Exactly.
You were the customer interface. You were every role in the business at once. Exactly. As I'm sure everyone listening to this can understand and resonate with.
Exactly. So we went to one young couple who are really foundational in terms of how we got to where we got. And we said to them, kind of same questions as everybody else. Why is it that you left? And kind of fairly annoyed and semi-exasperated, they said, you're more expensive than Take A Lot, right? And we're like, oh crap, so you left because they're cheaper. And also we know we're more expensive than Take A Lot because they're kind of our supplier. So obviously we're more expensive than Take A Lot. So they said, why do you think it is that we've not bought from Take A Lot? And we were like, well, we did the classic thing where we were like, but in our brains we're going, wow, that was really stupid not to think that. And, see previous notes about being stupid 24, 25-year-olds. And we said, could you tell us? They said, the reason why we buy from you instead of from Takealot is because Takealot delivers at some point between 9 and 5. But you guys always delivered at the time that we asked you to, and you followed the instructions, because my baby is napping at the times when I don't want you to deliver. And if you delivered at those times, then you'll wake my baby up, and then I might as well have gone to the store anyway and gotten 80 decibels directly piped into my eardrum and had a wider selection of things to choose from and gotten everything I need, and then come back home. So what you're solving for...
They were paying you for peace and quiet.
Exactly. They're paying us to remove the anxiety from the delivery experience for them. And we thought that we were selling diapers, but we weren't. We were selling an anxiety-free experience. And that blew our minds and totally changed the way that we conceived of the business and how we were solving the problem for people.
The exact same things happened to us in our own journey, because we're at the problem solution fit stage, and we're essentially really trying to find messaging that's going to help us really scale and get a lot of people seeing the value of what we do. But what really surprised us is, we've got, obviously I'm super biased, but I think the best strategy methodology in the world. And if you knew anything about my business partner that we got our IP from, which I don't have the time to get into now, you'd understand why I can say that with some relative validation. But the point is, what we thought was going to the market is really good facilitation, amazing strategy, really well thought through, lots of abilities to learn, something that's really customized and really good fit for you. And it's going to create a way for you to really grow your business and shoot the lights out. But the feedback from the customers that we got was clarity and confidence in getting my sanity back. So the reason why the value that I'm getting from this is that I have a sense of clarity and confidence that I didn't necessarily have before. And and what I found so fascinating with that is the fact that it's you're telling me the value that you got was not something tangible related to your business, but was intangible related to your state as an entrepreneur. And I was like, that's fascinating. I don't really know how to market and scale off that now, but now I'm on the journey of figuring out how to do so. And to your points around it's you're selling diapers, but it's reducing anxiety. I'm selling strategy, and it's about creating clarity and confidence.
Totally. In a world where the difference in price and cost is so marginal, there is so much competitive advantage in a different experience. That's obviously that's really where the fight is fought, when you have incumbents of kind of similar status on paper in terms of service level and price. So that kind of set us straight in terms of our thinking. So we said, okay, cool. we're a diaper business that is removing the delivery experience, removing anxiety from the delivery experience. And so we would walk around to people. We were still doing really it was at such a small state, 100 customers. We were still doing knock and drop cold call selling, really. So in between to-dos and stuff, we would walk around the same business. We stayed in the same business park. We just rented a very small little kind of 4 square meter or 10 square meter office. We would walk around this business park where it was mixed retail. So there were offices and there was retailers on the bottom floor. We would walk around to everybody and we'd go, we remove anxiety from the delivery experience. So that's why you should buy diapers from us. And invariably the person we'd be talking to would say well, hey, Brie, I'm a 55-year-old dude. My kid's your age. I haven't needed diapers for a while, but I really like the way that you guys talk about this and your energy and your vim and stuff. And I've got stuff that needs to get to customers occasionally, a mixed retail place. So it was everything from frozen fish fillets to leather laptop bags. They would say, we deliver on XYZ days. Would you be interested in doing those deliveries for me? Because we're neighbors, we work in the same building, we know each other, and I like your vibe. So Roy and I kind of looked at each other and went, yeah, cool. We'd absolutely be able to do that. And they'd go, cool, how much does it cost? And we went, we'll send you the rate sheet. So we went back to the office, conceived of one and gave it to them. And pretty quickly, within about 2 months, we were making more revenue from doing deliveries for other people than from selling diapers. Which is both a function of our prowess or lack thereof as diaper salespeople, but also of the size of this and ubiquity of this problem for retailers and other enterprise businesses. And so we, at that point, realized, okay, what this thing that we've started, the delivery is the juice. It's not the diapers. And we have an opportunity to solve this problem for multiple retailers and not just us. And we think that that's going to be easier in terms of succeeding than, or at least more viable in terms of succeeding than competing with Takealot on the price of diapers. Because the moment they changed their delivery experience, we're dead. So we pivoted from WumWum to WumDrop. And how we got the name WumDrop is, again, we still have no money at this point. And again, we cruised through the CSV of free URLs. And wouldn't you know it, right below WumWum is WumDrop. And we said, perfect. Keeping this weird WUM in the name helps us to remember the journey of how we got to this delivery company and kind of the core of the experience that we're solving at the heart of the business. And adding drop, just, we're a delivery company, plus, it's a free URL. So we became WumDrop and began canvassing retailers for work, initially fairly small. And then we began to get interest from larger retailers like Zando and TFG, at which point we realized that to do this on a spreadsheet or without technology, which brings us back to us being a tech-enabled business, would not at all be scalable. Not possible. We did know a guy called Rob Wilkinson from Butler's Pizza. So Rob Wilkinson founded Butler's Pizza back in the day. And we thought to ourselves, okay, we need to both scale this business, and that means scaling the delivery network. So on the one hand, we've got this delivery network you need to scale. On the other hand, we need technology. Who is someone that we know who has scaled the delivery network without owning their own assets? Because we don't have money to buy cars and employ people. And if anyone who's been to UCT knows that Butlers is a thing that you can work for. You bring your own car, you put a Butler sign on, you dress in a fun Halloween outfit, and you wrangle folks in the southern suburbs for tips. So we went to Rob and we said, hey, Rob, we promise we're not going to be delivering pizzas. This is the idea for the business. How the hell do you do this? And he was incredibly generous and essentially gave us the blueprint for spinning up your own crowdsourced delivery network where you don't own the assets and don't employ the people. But he did give us a warning and said, you will absolutely need robust technology for this if you plan to scale this outside of Cape Town. And Rob didn't need to, because Rob is a retailer and he makes his money not from delivering, but from selling pizzas. But we were going to make money from deliveries, which is a much lower take rate in terms of revenue and much tighter margin. So scale is necessary. And we went, yeah, sure, cool. Thanks, Rob. Kind of like hand waving the hard part away. And scale this thing with his advice to a certain point until it became extremely hard to get any bigger. At which point we did face down the ugly truth of the fact that we needed to run this thing with technology.
Sorry, why was it, just at this point, why was it so extremely hard to be able to scale and get any bigger at that point?
In order to...
Because are you mentioning the technology side of it, but I'm obviously thinking about the nature of what you do being very centric towards your entire competitive advantage around customer experience. And not just yours, but being the one that your clients want to be able to provide as well. Which is that's standard operating procedures, that's systems, that's processes, but that's also extensive onboarding and training.
Yeah, it is. All of which is simplified and made more efficient with technology. But really at this time, all we were thinking about, and it goes back to density, was how the hell do we spend less time creating optimized routes? Basically, how can we stop doing this with Google Maps, which is what we were doing in the first 3 or 4 months of WumDrop. How do we stop? How do we get to a point where we can build routes of more than 10? Because Google Maps web interface only lets you get up to 10 stops. And how do we stop building this ourselves? Surely a computer can do this faster and more robustly than we can and more accurately. And so the back office time of doing route optimization manually, of communicating delivery expectations with customers manually, communicating delivery expectations to drivers manually, all of this is an enormous time sink and can be done by a computer in seconds, whereas it takes a human hours. And also you need quite a lot of local geographic understanding to be able to route effectively around places. So we knew that we needed.
Simon, before you continue, I think you described a lot of what that state was, but I think also what I'm imagining the challenge was at that time of we've got an element of control right now. I think you've obviously acknowledged the kind of business model that you have and the margins that you get. It's necessary for the scale is a necessity, and I think that's core to what the answer is going to be. But I think the thinking that I have there's a level of control that you have over the business at that point in terms of the customer experience, the customer interface, and the way that things are running. Now, moving towards what you're saying is that from a technology business is like there's going to have to be a complete rebuild from the outside in order to do what it is that you are doing. What was it that really, when did the penny drop that motivated that change? Or was it just something, was it obvious, or did it require something significant for you to make that change?
It was something obvious. I can't remember the exact experience, but it was absolutely something like we had X deliveries to do in a day, and we just couldn't. There was no way that we could. We'd reached the maximum peak of our productivity to the point we were beginning to let down customers that we had onboarded, because the number of deliveries we had on any given day exceeded our ability to be able to manually create routes, optimize them, brief drivers, and then manage the driver execution. Like in those first few days, anybody who knew me knew that I was basically never off WhatsApp or Telegram. I was constantly communicating with drivers because it was completely manual, and which was fine. We were extremely motivated, so we were happy to work very hard, and it was sustainable insofar as we were young, so we had a crap load of energy to be able to burn through. But it wasn't sustainable insofar as we couldn't do the deliveries that we had sold, that we had onboarded, and we needed to automate.
And I see that every single time in terms of that transfer point. And the problem is again, the motivation for people to change. Yours was just quite clear in a day in terms of, I think it's again, especially because your bread and butter was customer experience. You were so sensitive to that quality and that customer experience to begin with. But I think for a lot of people, when they start hitting the scaling journey, is what happens is the moment that you start getting this point where you can't keep up with the quality of what it is that you had beforehand, that's when the signs start showing that you actually need to really evolve your business into a different stage and state of being. And I think for a lot of people, they will leave that and try solve it by just working harder for longer. But then they get to a point where actually either a lot of negative reviews come through, or they lose some major clients, and then they realize they have a proper wake-up call. And it's at that point, and then they need to do the change anyway. You caught it as soon as you just there was a day, number of deliveries, can't deliver on this, we need a change.
Let's pause here for a moment. If you've made it this far into the episode, it's probably because we're talking about things that you're trying to implement in your business. You found your sweet spot in the market, you've gained momentum, and you've already been through a phase of growth. Because of this, you know that on the outside, growth is super sexy. But on the inside, it's incredibly difficult to achieve and to sustain. So now I've got a question for you. Now that you know the sacrifices it takes to achieve growth, how much time are you currently spending thinking about your direction and your next phase of growth? I bet not as much as you'd like, because you're still in the thick of it. Leading, deciding, pushing for performance, pursuing new opportunities, maybe even thinking about selling the business. See, your story is yours. But this chapter where growth meets complexity, this is when things get hard. Because you can listen to insights from podcasts and stories from people that have been there before, but applying it to your context is a completely different ballgame. So let me help you. If you want to have a 90-minute, no strings attached conversation with me, then head over to Metavolve's website in the description of this podcast below, and let me help you navigate this next phase of growth. Because at the end of the day, building a great business is complex, but it doesn't have to be complicated.
Yeah, it was like existentially unacceptable to us. It wasn't just a business problem. We were really overly, well, not overly, but we were really strongly emotionally invested in the experience that people were having with the delivery, because we we had already looked the death of a business in the face with the drop-off of customers from WumWum, and we knew it was directly tied to experience. And so the moment people started having experience friction on WumDrop as it scaled, there was an appropriately motivating mix of terror and also just DNA for experience there. And at that point, we knew that we had to go to market to raise capital to be able to build our own technology. At the time, we were extremely adamant that we needed to build our own technology. In retrospect, I don't know how wise that decision was. And look, it's kind of like 6 of some, half a dozen of the other, insofar as we built our own technology, and that meant that the value of the company was higher when we raised money and also when we eventually sold, because it was our own IP. And also because, and we can get into this a bit later, the specifics of South African spatial planning are completely bonkers, like because of the Group Areas Act. And so technology that is built for Western Europe or America just doesn't one-to-one apply here. There are considerations around routing and geographical spacing that folks can't consider, like a place that is 1 kilometer away from another place. If you're switching from town to township, the algorithms that are mostly available in Western Europe and America assume that the 1 kilometer that it previously digested and calculated for will be the same as the other one, including Google Maps, by the way. But it doesn't understand that it doesn't have the data or the information to consider that the road that you're navigating may or may not exist, may or may not have tar, may or may not have accurate addresses, because that's what happens when you neglect town planning for the majority of your population for the majority of your country's existence. You just don't have accurate data because you decided to ignore the people who live in your country at best. So we had to build our own technology, and so we decided to hire our own developers, and developers are expensive, especially if you're starting. And we didn't. We went to market to raise cash, but we didn't raise enough cash in retrospect at all. So we had quite a handful of angel investors. We had Hans Spielthenner, and this apologies to any angels that I forget off the top of my head, but we had Hans Spielthenner, we had Rob Stokes, Justin Stanford, Finney Lingham, Ernst Herzog, Mike Lowe, Sarah Matinho. If I forget anybody, guys, it's not intentional, because I only took my Vyvanse half an hour ago. But yeah, so the point I'm trying to illustrate is that we had lots of angels, too many, and we didn't ask enough cash from each of them in retrospect. And the consequence of that was we were a business that was building technology to optimize our ways of working and learning our ways of working as we were going. And the building of the technology was expensive, which means we had a shorter runway than was required. And that meant that as founders, we weren't paying ourselves any money. So we were becoming extremely financially stressed in this moment too. And we had angel investors that, because of a combination of our own bad storytelling, and a misunderstanding of where the business would go, assumed that we would become the Uber for deliveries and that we would be exited by 30 and be all living in a commune in Zanzibar. When we began running out of money, after raising initial rounds, we got into a situation where the angels were extremely frustrated. And they're frustrated because they were unhappy with them. I believe they're unhappy with their money being used for us to find optimal ways of working. And because we ourselves didn't yet understand that customization was necessary in terms of the tech because of South Africa. This is stuff I can say now after 10 years of the journey. But at the time, we're like, we can't tell you why, but we have an instinct that we need our own stuff, and we couldn't articulate it properly. And it's obviously more expensive to have your own stuff. And that's why, if I was, you referenced Loop earlier. I don't think Loop is not a competitor of ours. Loop is an enabler of businesses like ours. And Loop is such a fantastic product because it was built locally and they took their time to build it well. And it considers the South African environment. So it's a really fantastic piece of technology. Kim and her team did a wonderful job there. But Loop didn't exist at the time, unfortunately. So yeah, we got to a point in 2015 where there's one kind of apocryphal moment that really illustrates 2015 for me as a year. I was standing in my kitchen getting ready to go to work, and I'd been wearing, like when you're on the VC patrol, on the funding patrol, you tend to wear one uniform if you're a 20-something-year-old person starting a business, which is the old trainery brown shoes, chinos, and light blue shirt uniform. So I'd been really wearing that thing thin, and I remember rolling up my sleeve because it was like a relatively warm day or something. I was going to go to work with like sleeves rolled up, and I tore the sleeve off my shirt because it becomes so threadbare, and I just cried. I was holding my cuff, and the sleeve was off my shoulder. I was like standing in the kitchen, just quietly sobbing, and then I got myself together, took my shirt off, put it in the bin, and went and put another shirt on and went to work. But that was a tough year because we didn't raise enough cash. We ran out of it too quickly. Though our developers did a really, really wonderful job being thoroughly underpaid for what they could be getting in the market anyway. And at the end of 2015, Roy quit the business. And he quit the business because, having talked to him now about this, at the time I was extremely angry. I was angry for a number of years. He quit the business because he felt hopeless. And I completely understand that. I also felt hopeless. In many respects, I felt trapped. I remember also another crying episode, kind of just sitting in my car in the garage and also having a drizz, and feeling like I was in this impossible position where I told myself the story that I needed a business to succeed, to be financially secure. So those were the stakes. And if I wasn't, it was like death. Both financially secure for myself and for my family, because my dad's never gotten back to the same point that he was before, and they're not getting any younger. And that this was really, really hard, and that people were increasingly frustrated with us, and I couldn't see a way through. And then he quit. And so that was the point of the anger at him, was felt obviously abandoned and betrayed and stuff.
When you needed the support the most.
Yeah. But now, like with time and distance, I completely get it, man. Like I also felt totally hopeless, and I was also pretty close to quitting. But the rub of him quitting was because we were idiots and noobs and first timers. In our MOI and shareholders agreements with our angels, we agreed to vest our shares because, and it's probably wisdom from them, because look what did happen. Roy did quit. And so with Roy quitting, not enough of his shares had vested for us to jointly retain control of the business. And that meant that the control ceded to the angels as a collective group, with me having the largest minority chunk and Roy having the smallest, or a small minority chunk relative to me. And that was the picture at the end of 2015, was an angel investor group that was frustrated by a company that was pulling in good revenue but wasn't growing as quickly as they wanted it to, running out of money faster than they wanted it to, and was telling them a slightly modified story every 2 to 3 months about what the real service opportunity was and who was interested. And I promise I'm going to land this airplane soon, Cam, in terms of our finding story and how we got to macro. So you can imagine that in that scenario, I'm kind of fairly keen to please our customers, right? Our clients. I was doing weekly hypercare visits to the existing clients that we had, essentially asking, is there anything you're not happy with? Don't leave us. We're trying to raise some money. Really, like, obviously wouldn't say that to them, but the subtext is like, if they were to leave us now, we would be so screwed, because to tell a story about needing to raise money while also having the context of one of your founders leaving and your clients leaving, it's kind of a hard tail to swing. So in one of these hypercare visits, I visited one of our clients called SA Florist. And at the time, in the office visit, I kind of dropped in unannounced. There was a guy called Colin Fleming, who was the head of MassMart e-commerce at the time. And he was talking to them because he was interested in acquiring either their technology or them as a company, because his vision was he wanted to build MassMart as a marketplace business. SA Florist architecture was a marketplace. Whereas Net Florist is centralized, SA Florist at the time was aggregating supply from various florists and having the products delivered directly to the clients. And that's where we came in. So he was talking to them, and I suppose, just by dint of the classic entrepreneurial young founder thing, you kind of want to tell everybody about your business. We got chatting, and he liked the cut of our jib. And unbeknownst to me, he went back to MassMart, and he told MassMart about us, put us on their radar, and essentially pitched for WumDrop to be acquired by MassMart. And that idea was parked and shelved. The timing wasn't right for MassMart. MassMart, though, had been acquired by Walmart. And every June or July, there is the Walmart shareholders conference in Arkansas, in Bentonville, in the headquarters. And the MassMart leadership goes by dint of the fact that Walmart owns them. And Doug McMillan, who's the CEO of Walmart, was the new CEO at the time, and was talking about something incredibly important to Walmart that was going to help them fight back against Amazon, which was final mile delivery. And he presented about that pretty much all week, and so did a senior leader in Walmart called Sylvester John, who was building something called Walmart Spark, which was essentially WumDrop for Walmart. Same model, a delivery as a service business that made use of a network of independent contract drivers that executed on the client's behalf. And in that case, the client was just Walmart. And he was building this business, and it was doing incredibly well, and was adding so much value for Walmart. So MassMart's leadership came back to South Africa with the idea that they needed a final mile business. And the feelers went out to us. And although 2015 had ended on the note of incredible foreboding, by 2016, we had an offer, actually on my birthday, 4th of November 2016, we had a firm offer from MassMart. Yeah, it was great. I've never been so happy driving to Cape Gate Macro. For that we had a firm offer from MassMart. Mass Stores, which is Macro, was going to be the entity acquiring us, because it was while they were kind of all in on the idea, they obviously were managing some risks. They were having one of the smaller businesses buy us. So Mass Stores bought out our angels. I didn't get any money off the table. Neither did Roy. But that didn't matter to them, because they were buying majority control of the business by buying out the angels. And I, at that point, was frigging relieved that none of our angels lost money, that they got their money back, because boy howdy, I was worried that they would. The next chapter about that is kind of our journey inside MassMart and how we got to Walmart. But appreciate talking for a long time. So I'm going to pause there.
So Simon, thank you for sharing the depth to that story, because what you've highlighted so much is why I care so much about what Metavolve does, right? Is like our entire purpose is to accelerate the time it takes to build a great sustainable business. And the vision that we have is just imagine a world where 10% more SMEs were able to be sustainable without being dependent on the founders that started it. What would that do for wealth creation? What would that do for meaning? What would that do for mental health? What would that do for jobs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And so the point in when our clients start working with us is you've highlighted multiple steps on that point, where the most proactive point is before that. I can see we're scaling. I want to get ahead of the curve, and I want to make sure that we are doing this sustainably and properly as we scale. This is usually the second or third time founder, or when they're starting their second business unit or third business unit within the business, and they know how complex this is. They've been there before. That's the ideal point because there's a lot of pain that gets avoided. The next point that you describe is the fact that you're realizing that customers are starting to get burned. Your clients are going to start leaving you, or negative customer experiences coming back, which means that there's operational chaos going on and you're struggling to keep up with the demand and the control within the systems. And that's the next point that we come in terms of what's the strategy, because where you're investing your time, attention, and resources previously was almost exclusively to sales and operations. And now the point is, now it needs to transition in terms of I need to focus a lot in terms of my internal environment with my people, structures, capabilities, systems that I need to employ in order to be able to do that, because I've solved the issue of demand creation, right? That's fine. Now it's about fulfilling that demand, which is a very different view, and it requires a bit more of a comprehensive strategy. Because instead of just focusing on the two functions of sales and operations, I mean, in simplicity, now it's everything else that I need to focus on in my business to do so, and that's the strategy to focus on that, but then also to then resource it. And now speaking to the next point around raising funding. And when also people are struggling to raise a round of funding, especially around pre-Series A, Series A, it's also interesting where you were at the journey in terms of getting angel investors at a point where a lot of people that have been VC-backed from idea stage, usually at your point, they would be looking at around between the seed to Series A kind of raise, and you went to angels at that time. And it's the same point around how is it we're going to raise funding in order to do this, because from a unit economics perspective, it's looking fantastic. But how much we're going to raise and what we need to fork out it's a very different skill set and different thing that we need to invest into, and we're struggling to raise accordingly from the right investors. That's another point that we work with our clients. And the problem is, this is where my ideal is that the earlier it is that we work with our clients, the better, because all of this pain gets avoided. Because the next problem that happens is move that on along, and then suddenly there's this frustration that's kicking in from shareholders, from leadership team, from employees, from customers, because it's just not a well-oiled machine, and it's still growing, right, in terms of revenue. And on the outside is like things are fantastic. On the inside, it's absolute chaos, right? And from there is like, this is when we talk about the chaos of scaling. You're in that point now where no one seems to be happy, but the top line's growing, and by all accounts is like, your business is doing great. Why are you miserable? Why are you burning out? Why are you stressed? Why is everyone pissed off with me? And it's like, and this is the point where also especially it can be so lonely, because it's like, I don't deserve to be burning out right now because the business is doing fantastic. And that's one of the points where, again, things start to get tested, and I struggle to see the woods from the trees and get this perspective, and there's this fog. And this is when I talk about that clarity and confidence. This is when it starts becoming most potent as an antidote, is because I don't really know which way to go, losing confidence in myself, losing confidence in my business, and I'm not clear how to get out of this. And then the final point where it gets at its absolute worst is burnout. Right, one of the founders burns out, things get hit an absolute crisis point. There's a realization that I can't keep doing what we've always been doing, and I really need to take a step back, and I don't even know what that solution is. And then, the difficulty with me and Metavolve is that the clients that we get at burnout or chaos are the people that need us most desperately, but are almost impossible to find because they're so deep inside their business and what's going on. And so, and the solutions that we're able to provide is just that clarity in terms of what is that you need throughout. So all of that is less trial and error based. And this is what I care. This is why I care so much, is because that journey can be so painful. And the hard part for me is that I want to get people earlier stage, but the thing is the earlier stage, that behavioral change to look for strategy without really understanding what we're getting into, is it takes this radical shift and really heading a crisis in order to be able to do so. So as much as I love it, that's also my frustration, is because I want to help people avoid that. But it's usually at that point when they look and open up to a different solution. So you've really highlighted a lot of the pain of what can happen in the scaling journey, and why it's at this point of going from startup to scale up, strategy becomes such a critical element, and why Metavolve really exists at the market that we do within.
Any second or any non-first time founders who are hearing this will already know this, but building on your point about how it's difficult to get, especially first time founders, to pay attention to what you're trying to do for them, it is honestly just a function of ignorance, for lack of a better word, or just not knowing what causes burnout. So everyone listening to this podcast has an internet connection, which means everybody listening to this podcast has enough calories in a day. like we live in calorie surplus. We are all worrying about losing weight, not trying to put on enough weight to not feel sleepy in a day. Burnout is not exhaustion insofar as like you've run out of literal calories and are tired. Something that I know now, which I didn't know at the time, is that burnout is emotional exhaustion, which is usually derived from a loss of hope. Because as folks who are probably naturally fairly energetic, people who start businesses, your energy is not going to be the problem that you run out of. It's going to be being able to see a path or a way, and being frustrated by not making a good thing. So something that can degrade your hope is in the process of scaling. Like I felt this, the top line is growing, revenue is growing, but there's a very small cohort of entrepreneurs who care literally only about revenue. Revenue is awesome, and just if you were to pass my origin story, I didn't do this to not make any money. Like money is an important output of it. But
money as an entrepreneur is profits. One of my favorite, sorry to jump in there, but one of my favorite sayings is top line is vanity, bottom line is sanity.
Yeah. And in order to propel yourself to make both revenue and profit, you get your energy, motivation from the knowledge that you're making a good thing, it's the meaning that you create around your business, right? And what can get divorced from your business, and what you can lose sight of in the process of scaling during all the mess when people are pissed off, etc., is the meaning of what you're doing. And I think that is the beginning of burnout. If you get to a point of frustration or friction where the meaning of what you are building is lost, or if you see the trajectory of what you're building getting divorced from the desired meaning, then you can begin to lose hope, and that's the beginning of burnout and quitting. It's not that you lose enough calories, and I know that now as somebody who started a business, and so the next time I start a business, I'm going to be on the lookout for that. But I didn't know that, like I didn't know that when I first started, that I needed to be careful of and be super nurturing of both the meaning that I create. Why am I doing this thing? What is the mission? And also having an awareness that when things are scaling and messy, that it can feel like I'm not achieving that, and protect myself by knowing that this is just a phase, and that this doesn't mean that this whole thing's gone to shit and that there's no meaning and that I need to despair. The despair is when you begin burning out.
100%. And again, another saying that I love is don't give up, just rest. And the part of the reason why there is that, to go one level deeper about burnout is 3 different symptoms. It's emotional exhaustion, depersonalization or cynicism, and lack of personal accomplishment. So emotional exhaustion is I'm finishing my day drained, not just tired. Depersonalization or cynicism is I stop caring, right? I don't really care about my customers or my employees or my shareholders anymore. I don't really care about what's really in front of me, and you literally become quite detached. And then that lack of personal accomplishment is quite obvious within the word, is you don't feel like you're not accomplishing anything. But it's that last part that makes burnouts especially insidious, is because I don't feel like I'm accomplishing anything. I don't deserve to be burnt out or as tired as I am. So what we do is we actually work harder, because of the point is like, in order for me to now earn the rest, I need to work harder to have the sense of accomplishment where I can actually pause and take a step back. And then you just start spiraling, right? And that's why burnout is such a challenging syndrome to be able to go through. And the reason why it's a syndrome is because it leads to physical and mental illnesses and disorders at the end of it, whether it's anxiety, whether it's depression. It's your body. If you don't rest, your body will force you to. And so that's where it can be so intense and hectic. And for me, to your point is around the hope and element there. For me, the simple antidote for burnout when you're aware of it is not about stepping back, it's stepping out. As being able to just step out and have that perspective and just have a look of, because like the way that the metaphor I use is you're swimming in the ocean and you are going to Atlantis, which is your vision. And you know what that is, and it's this beautiful island that's there, right? And you've seen it, which is why you jumped in the water in the first place to swim. But now the point is you're at this point where you're surrounded by fog and the storms are rocky and you just have to keep swimming and you have to keep treading water because otherwise you will drown. And so the point of where you keep going is you'll lift your head up, but you can't see, and you have no idea which direction you're headed, and you don't know where Atlantis is anymore. You don't really know how to get there. And the point of what you need to be able to do is that you actually need to be able to just get out of the water and take a step back for a bit, get your head above the clouds, reevaluate yourself and see where it is that you are, where Atlantis is. And the process of that is it actually, you don't just go above the fog now clears. And so when you get back in the water, you're now able to swim, lift your head up and have a clear view of where it is and then keep going. But it's necessary when you have that fog to be able to take a step back, take a step out, not even step back, to kind of reevaluate what's going on, what you're building, why you're doing it, where it's headed, and just take that moment to really reflect and collect before jumping back in. And for me, that's always the most useful thing. And it's so, I also find it so interesting because it's not something that's practical, right? It's not something that's a solution to my problems. But the thing is, it is the treatment of a psychological issue. It's not the treatment to a business problem.
In terms of that that last piece that you touched on with burnout, the negative self-talk that happens, like, oh my God, I suck so much because I'm trying even harder and I'm not accomplishing, what I believe is anything. I suck. As a first-time founder, you are saying that to yourself because you don't know the things that you don't know, which is why stuff like your service, Cameron, is valuable, because you're teaching things to people that you aren't innately born with. No one is born with the knowledge of how, or an innate instinct of how to manage stuff like management frameworks. It's literally a knowledge that you have to acquire. And management frameworks make the process of scaling more efficient, less messy, less costly, more potent in terms of the go forward of your business. But you don't know them. Like no one at a primary school is showing talent to be a town planner. Like in the same way that one shows talent to be a leader or an athlete or an artist or a mathematician. It's stuff that has to be learned and acquired. And as a first time founder, you don't know this. And I would say that if you are a first time founder and you are giving yourself negative self-talk, like I'm trying really hard and I'm sucking and therefore I suck, I hope that you hear that other founders who are successful have said the same things themselves and that it's not true. Like you just don't know stuff. You're trying for the first time and you will have to learn this thing, and the next time you do it, it will be better. And if you are dissatisfied with your result, you still don't suck personally. There's probably some process that you don't know about that you can learn and will improve your way of working.
And I fully agree. And I think what's also especially challenging is if you're someone that has a lot of that critical self-talk. What can be even worse is then when you learn the thing, you start getting frustrated and impatient with yourself as like, shit, why didn't I know this sooner?
Oh, yeah. That's classic bullshit.
Yeah. Anyway, so that I think that's both of our therapy journeys just highlighted in one short little conversation. But thank you for opening that up, and like thank you for the real talk there for a moment, because this is the nature of what makes entrepreneurship so hard, is just this constant battle with I don't know what I don't know, having to figure things out from scratch. And as the business grows and gets infinitely more complex, it just becomes harder and harder. The problems become more and more difficult, and the solutions to them change, not just become more difficult and require work. The solutions are actually fundamentally different than what they were before. And so it's such a difficult journey. So, okay, so to pull it back into the journey and story of WumDrop, you now have, you've been bought out, or at least I want to say bought out, but I imagine at the time you feel like you've been rescued, right? You again, going back to that metaphor of swimming in this ocean and this fog, and then suddenly you just see this beacon of light coming on, and it's just got, MassMart macro branding on it. And it's like, we're going to take you in this ship and dry you off, sort you out. Talk to me about the journey of the business, because again, financially speaking, at least in top line, is doing pretty great. But the way that you tell the story, it can seem like on the inside, it's not doing so great. So what was this process that you went on to really put out a lot of fires, fix a lot of broken systems and processes, and essentially get your own sanity back. Tell me about that kind of journey after the acquisition.
In any business that's servicing corporates, especially as a young small business, cash flow is always going to be a challenge because you're delivering a service now and incurring costs now, and you are being reimbursed for those on a 30 to 60 to 90-day basis, depending on how your clients behave. And then they will be doing all sorts of fun jazz, like if they pay you within 30 days, they will themselves deduct 1 or 2% from the invoice because, in their eyes, they're being really cool to you. And then you are having to have a chat with them about how they've just wiped out all of your margin. And they're like, okay, cool, you're tiny and we're enormous. So, I guess if you feel really bad about that, you could take this further, but do you want to feel massive pain? Also, you should be grateful that we're using you, etc. and so on. So cash flow for a business that's servicing corporates is the biggest problem probably when you're scaling, apart from ways of working. Not even touching on culture and hiring yet. So we were in an interesting position where we were acquired by MassMart, who's a retailer who uses logistics businesses. But in terms of the company-wide DNA and understanding of logistics, at that point in 2017, there was very, very little. There were obviously people in the business within the various logistics departments that had deep industry knowledge and were experts, but they were logistics experts operating within a larger DNA of retail. So the business championed the DNA of merchandising, of retailing, of being merchants and sellers. Didn't champion the DNA of being logisticians. And what that did, in my opinion, this is personal opinion, is that the folks who were providing the really critical cogs to service customers in an increasingly growing segment, namely e-commerce, weren't taken as seriously as they ought to have been. And not because of any bad intent, but because of the fact that the DNA of a really enormous business was so deeply entrenched in retail, because that's, why wouldn't you be if you're a retailer for the last couple of decades, very successfully so. And that meant that we were in a very interesting position as a small business that had been acquired. So in general, any business that's acquired by a corporate is going to be facing a cultural challenge at best and a cultural battle at worst. Insofar as you are a business that is operating at a speed that is light years faster than your purchaser. For very basic analogy, you are a fruit fly with a life cycle of 3 days, and they are an elephant that is on their third set of teeth, and they're 45 years old, and they know about browsing. They don't know about eating fruit. So you are trying to get folks to understand your business, understand your business model, appreciate the problem that you're solving, and appreciate it in the context of their customer, not just in terms of the context of your business being successful. Because if you approach it as the acquired business from the perspective of, well, you own us and therefore you should care that our business is successful, only a small number of people who are intimately involved with you, namely probably the acquiring team and maybe the board that was deployed to your company, and mentors, which is not very many people in the context of a total corporate, will actually care. Everyone else really cares about the sales number, if you're bought by a retail business like we were, to customers and the number of customers and how we're doing relative to other retailers. So a thing that I didn't appreciate that, right? I had no idea. I didn't know anything about retail. And I was initially extremely, and I'd say probably petulantly frustrated by the fact that people didn't give a damn, that they cared about their sales number as MassMart. And now as an exited person, I'm like, oh, of course, you idiot. Why wouldn't they? That's the business they're running. They bought you ostensibly to help with the sales number, not because they care deeply about deliveries. And that was a learning curve for me in the initial purchase. I was very, very lucky insofar as I had somebody on our board, a guy called Dean Bauer, who was the head of logistics for Macro. He was a deep champion of what we did because he saw the value that we unlocked. He saw the different level of customer experience that we were able to give to Macro's customers, and also had a pretty good retail brain on him, and so understood the connection between that and higher retail sales numbers. And a super smart guy, and he was really able to articulate that story. And I learned a lot from him in terms of how to articulate stories inside corporates, and like copy pasted a lot of his talking points. And he was a invaluable teacher for the years that he was there working with WumDrop, but especially in that first 6 months.
Sorry, Simon, before you continue, I just want to double click specifically on that for especially any of the audience members selling into corporates, partnering with corporates. You mentioned there, and again, it's like my experience of working at the Fashini Group, I know that the political dynamics of being in a corporate are very different to what it is being in an entrepreneurial business. So you can be quite a straight shooter in an entrepreneurial business and everyone prefers it. Whilst in corporate it's a very different animal. So when you mentioned the fact that you were taught and you learned how to essentially navigate this organizational awareness and this political and complexity that exists in a corporate, can you download, just for the sake of the audience, any specific lessons that you learned that worked for you in being able to, articulate stories and get buy-in and get people on your side within a corporate environment?
Absolutely. It's pretty basic stuff in retrospect. It's just, for me, I don't know if this is true for all entrepreneurs, but certainly for me, it's the really basic thing of finding out first what they care about, what people in general care about. I suppose it was partly a function of being purchased by them. I felt like, oh, cool, they really care about us. They care about our business. And it was emotionally shocking for me to consider, realize, and integrate the fact that they don't care about us per se, but they care about us helping them with their mission that they already have. And that is, if you're how old is that at the time? I guess like 27, 28. If you're a 28-year-old white guy who has gone through life with like everybody thinking or giving them the signal that they're like, a very special boy, to have that realization and to really sit with it is not nothing. But I did onboard that, and once I onboarded that, I was much more able. Wow, English is hard. I was able to much more effectively navigate the influencing of folks that was required for us to grow our business inside MassMart. So here's a worked example. Although we were owned by Macro and worked inside MassMart, it was not a given that other MassMart businesses were giving us their business, or even Macro. So any corporate, any large retailer will have extremely siloed and fractured avenues for fulfillment because of the fact that they've been built over many, many years. It's technical debt, really is what it is. And that means that you have kind of discrete environments where purchasing and spending decisions are made, and ways of working and operations flow down from that, right? To put it into kind of high level terms, you have, although you've got one brand selling, you'll have multiple fulfillment channels, and each fulfillment channel has its own discrete strategy, really. And that strategy may or may not include third-party delivery companies, even if they're owned by the parent company. And so we essentially had to resell inside MassMart to be able to get MassMart business, and it was not a given. It was a hard-bitten fight to demonstrate that we would both be more cost-effective and a better customer experience. And then eventually we began to get traction when we learned to deploy understanding what they wanted, which is that what they want is for their sales to grow, to connect the customer experience benefits with sales growth. And that is flipping hard inside any giant corporate that has, with those levels of fracturing, different levels of data integrity. Because in a business like ours that's transactional, when you're trying to prove out transactional unit economics, it's tough to do it when, for a whole picture, when different parts of that business literally maybe don't even have the data for you to pull from to demonstrate what cost would be. And so that then you have this operational layer with varying levels of data integrity. And then you have an executive layer that is going to sign off the business decision to switch to this new service provider, namely us. And those people want and demand an overall view. They would like to know what their balance sheet looks like if they offboard these vehicles, and what their P&L is going to look like if they onboard you as a service provider. And you can't demonstrate that because their own business doesn't have the data. And by the way, that is not just a MassMart example. That's true of every corporate we worked with. Every corporate we worked with.
Every cost center, that's the view of it, is because every team, every department is its own cost center. But every cost center essentially has its own financial statements, in essence. And and they've got their own ways of working, their own operations. It's a system like that. I've never thought about it to that level of depth, is that if you're going into a new cost center, you are essentially treating it as if it's a new business. And sorry, what I thought that I have in my mind now is like, but just going back a step, I think it's also very interesting from the entrepreneurial journey of going from an environment where you feel like you matter a lot. And you might not necessarily consciously be aware of this, but the fact that it's like, whether it's your employees or whether it's your own business or whether it's your customers, at this early stage is like, you feel like you matter because you're building something that's giving a lot of meaning and solving a lot of people. And to go into this corporate environment where you've been acquired, it's like just like reinforcing that point, we really matter. And then you try and engage with people and it's like, oh God, I don't matter at all. And that's a bit of a shock to the system. And the point is, it's like a lot of people, where this can often be the birthplace of potentially arrogance, in the sense that, or at minimum confidence. But the point now is that this humility check can come in, and it's necessary at certain points to. One is a reminder, if you're especially an ambitious person, is like how much scale there still is in terms of potential. But it's that realization that there's still so much more on the journey to get through. And especially if you're going to be working with corporates and through those partnerships, that kind of that requirement for having a low ego going in is actually a requirement, because you're going to get knocked with this feeling of, I don't know who you are and I don't care who you are anyway. And I need to know why this is going to be important to me.
Yeah. And we framed this so far with corporates being like fairly frustrating and full of friction to work with. But one of the other bewildering things that will happen to you is people, a vast array of people will point out the very valid shortcomings in your business, both in your model, your strategy, your ways of working, your even the experience of the product. And that is when you're combining the shock of I'm not the world's most important youngest child with this thing that I built where I just got a strong signal that it's awesome, has got a lot of holes in it. It's an extremely bewildering experience. You do need to combine. I'm a little bit allergic to telling entrepreneurs that they should never give up. Like, just don't, because objectively at some points there are good times to give up. And one of the endless discussions that we'll be having with entrepreneurs is, like, when do you choose to do that? But if you're met with a shock of somebody pointing out a shortcoming in your business, that's definitely not a time to give up. That's a time for grit. So grit up. And I was very lucky insofar as a reaction that I had, it wasn't a conscious choice. So I don't know if I get credit for it, but it was just an instinctive thing that happened, was that I became teachable. To say I made a decision is not capturing the automaticness of it, because if I was to say I made the decision, I get credit for it, and I don't know if I do. It's something that happened. I lent into being teachable, and I lent into learning about these different cost centers, and I lent into conquering this elephant and eating it bit by bit until I had gotten the different bits of businesses that I wanted and integrated with these different businesses and different cost centers in different ways in order for us to be able to effect delivery for them. To be able to say, although we're owned by MassMart, we actually now do service MassMart instead of just a small portion of it.
So before you continue, Simon, I just want to get into that moment, because whether it's I speak to really people that have truly made it, for example, like Nick, our business partner, who was the global chairman for YPO, second biggest IT company in South Africa in the 90s, owned 49% of Dimension Data, owned Dunlop for 12 years, as one does, right? You know,
Sure.
so there's
Just,
this,
on the side.
this on the side, right? Just one of many companies in his private equity portfolio. So just this element of success is, and it's the same thing with them, whether it's the same thing that a lot of founders have probably heard from VCs about the importance of coachability, right? And I think the hard thing about coachability is a lot of people say, I'm open to learning new things, I'm open to suggestions, right? I'm open to not being right, but that none of this necessarily equates to being teachable and being coachable. I think there's a very different mindset to that. So I just want to unpack, when you say about this moment that you chose to become teachable, one, what specifically happened that led you being A to B, like essentially not teachable to being teachable? And then how would you define what teachable was in that sense?
In the acquiring phase, I got a big signal that we were a good thing. And so my mindset was that we had made a good thing. And I'm very motivated by making good stuff. Like I love cooking, I love photography, I love singing, and in all things that I do, I don't need to win necessarily, although winning is lovely. It matters to me. I would hate to win and know that I've not made a good thing. Like the satisfaction of winning needs to be that the thing is nutritious and adds value and is a good thing in the world, regardless if it's a business or anything else.
I think what you just described for me is the difference between success and fulfillment.
Yeah, I'm very itchy with that fulfillment. I guess most people are. And you go from like the signal that you're fulfilled because you're making a good thing, to a signal where like, oh shit, that was wrong. The good thing that I've made has a lot of important and valid holes in it. And the desire to continue to make a good thing definitely switched me into, okay, I need to know more now. I want to know more, because this thing that I'm making, I want it and need it to be a good thing. And then secondly, which is an innate thing that I have, which I definitely, it's genetic. It's definitely from my grandfather, and my mom's got this in spades, and so does my dad. Is a very curious person. So I just get a lot of satisfaction out of learning about stuff in general, and understanding how things work, just knowing more. So the need, the deep, probably childhood trauma need to make a good thing, and then the engine of curiosity, I think, was a very good combination to drive me to continue to learn to make the business better. And that was really that was kind of first phase, that phase between 2017 and 2020, we definitely learned a lot about the business and the space. And I thought when we got to 2020 that we'd learned everything we needed to learn. And I got a second shock in 2020 when I again was put on my ass and realized how little I knew about the space and the science of this, and where the product was at. And that was when Walmart came in 2020. And that transformed the business in a big way, and definitely transformed me. I'd say the final 3 years of the business were the most important for both myself and for WumDrop.
So I love the way that you describe that, because it's, again, another lens in terms of helping me understand why is it that our clients go through the journeys that they do as leaders, and in terms of making the shift. Because, like, prime example beforehand, there's a lot of entrepreneurs that we'll deal with in the early stages. I don't need HR. Like, and this is a 46-person business, and it's like I don't really need HR. I don't necessarily even need to outsource it. And it's like, that's just the simple point. Is like, regardless of HR operations, is the fact that the people are your business. And two, afterwards going through our process, and it's not even the fact that now do I want strategic HR. It's about the fact that it's like I want to invest in the right people that can help us build in the right systems, help build in the right process. It's this awareness of like, sure, there's my best lane to be in is actually in terms of like product or operations or sales, and just like bringing my core knowledge about the business to the business, and I need other people in order to do that. And the reason why that shift happens naturally is because and again, I'm making sense of this as I'm talking, is that up until this point of when strategy actually starts becoming quite an essential part of your business, a lot of your frame of reference in terms of your success is in relation to how far you've come, which is for the necessary and essential, and that's so healthy to reflect, and it's very good emphasis for a sense of self-worth and confidence to really look at like, this is how far we've come, how good we've done. And the point there is, but the challenge there is, you have this moment now is like, okay, well, what we could become or what we aspire to become, and comparing oneself to that now is a completely different kettle of fish. And the view in terms of what it is that I need to be open to, then it's not where the point that you're in is, there's nothing else I need to really learn about my operations and sales and kind of customer. I've got that down. But validly true, because you do, because that's been your whole world. But that's what got you to the business of where it is now. To get to the business of where you want to be, it's now the point of how is it that I learn to be able to put a management team together? How is it that I look to be able to lead and mentor and coach people? How is it that I can show openness and curiosity towards strategic partnerships and understanding that instead of just going towards clients? There's openness towards learning processes and systems and hiring people that are fundamentally better than you at the things that you cared most about 6 months ago. And it's that point and that realization is like that clarity of direction. Being able to compare oneself to that, I've noticed an immediate kind of unlock of this coachability about the fact that it's like, okay, I now know what I don't know. And it's got nothing to do with these fields and functions and functional strategy and everything I need to know about HR marketing. It's just simply realizing that in order to have that business that I want to be, there's so many things that not only do I not know how to do, I'm not the best person to do those things. I don't have the time and resources to figure that out, and I need help. Right. And it's that point of help it's different, very different to being I need to be saved or I need to be rescued, is I need someone to help me do that because there's no way in hell I'm ever going to be able to. And it's just it's again, there's a lot of parallels to what you're describing to what I see in the work that we do as well.
Amen. I mean, that was the kind of the final phase of the journey. So we essentially bootstrapped inside MassMart. MassMart helped us a lot with cash flow. So I spoke about the cash flow challenge that a business like ours has when scaling. And so from a finance point of view, MassMart acted more like a bank with a line of credit for a business like ours that wouldn't have been able to get the same line of credit. And that kept us alive. That was invaluable. But didn't invest much insofar as actual cap and OPEX down to be able to invest in new particular areas. We were really funding that out of the margin, out of our profit. And we were finding profit in doing large item deliveries for MassMart. So MassMart moves a lot of fridges and so on. And we, by the lack of ignorance, because we didn't have previous experience of setting up a logistics business, didn't know about the value of hubs and distribution centers, and therefore didn't have any, which meant that we were delivering all items, including fridges, from point to point. And we stumbled upon a competitive point of difference insofar as, because we weren't taking a fridge from a person, from a warehouse to a hub and then to somebody, we were removing a huge portion of risk with regards to damage of that item, whether it's a dent or a scratch, whatever the case might be. And incumbent couriers hate moving large items because of the risk involved with moving fridges. But because we were sorting at A to B and had built our own software to be able to route effectively in South Africa, we were able to do this cost effectively and sustainably for less than what the incumbents were charging and for much more profit. So we kept ourselves alive inside MassMart by virtue of the fact that we started with macro large parcels and then began winning other large parcel deliveries inside MassMart. But 2020 came around and Walmart took a more significant interest in MassMart. So there was a changing of the guard. Guy Hayward, the previous MassMart CEO, stepped out, and a new American CEO, Mitch Slape from Walmart, joined, with a view from Walmart to accelerate the business, to really double down on their investment in MassMart, to make MassMart an African continent bulwark against the likes of Shein, Temu, and Amazon. And there was a real statement of intent from Walmart. So there was significant investment in terms of cash, but more importantly, there was real investment from them in terms of personnel. And so various Walmart offices, experienced people, were deployed to South Africa to work in the Johannesburg office. And one of those people was a guy called Sylvester John. Now, as a statement of intent, his title was Senior Vice President for E-commerce of Walmart Africa, not MassMart, right? So they're definitely making a point about the fact that Walmart's here and that they're going to be playing, and MassMart's the avenue for it. So he arrived, and as the SVP of e-commerce, he appraised what MassMart had on hand for e-commerce. And, you look at the various pillars, including the sales platforms, the marketing funnels. We moved on to warehousing and fulfillment, and then obviously final mile delivery. And while he was looking at all of these different pillars and putting things in place, it was brought to his attention that MassMart owned a final mile delivery company, which he hadn't really been made aware of, because see previous notes about without malintent, folks cannot really care about your small business inside a giant corporate, right? Like, you may think that this thing is the center of your universe, but you basically have the same revenue as a really successful KFC. So, like, who are you? So he took a look at our business, and he, in retrospect, interviewed and assessed me and took a deep dive. And as the guy who was on the stage with Doug McMillan in 2016, who was talking about final mile delivery, and as the guy who built Walmart Spark and had coincidentally now been deployed here as the SVP of e-commerce, he instantly grasped what our business was about. He saw the value of it. He saw a lot that he really liked. He saw a lot that he really didn't like, obviously, because he is a senior officer in a Fortune 1 company. Like, the guy's good, and he's built an enormous version of what we've got. And we're a bunch of TV script writing graduates who've never done this before, working in a smaller economy. And one of the, to your point about hiring people who know more than you, one of the things that he said to me was kind of real talk. He said, okay, my mission is to scale e-commerce inside this business by 5 times in 3 years. And to do that, I'm investing in the following areas. If I was to invest in you, I need you to grow by more than 5 times in 3 years, because I understand how your business works. You don't just service MassMart. You service other clients too, because delivery peaks and troughs happen during the day. MassMart might be very busy in the morning, but they'll have a lull in the afternoon. And somebody else might be very busy in the afternoon and not in the morning. And if you combine those two clients, you create a smooth peak for your drivers, which allows you to lower their cost per delivery because you're giving them a great daily rate, which improves your unit economics. Ta-da, model unlocked.
And I can imagine just that moment of the fact that it's like that took you years to figure out, and he was like, "No, this is obvious." I understand the business.
Yeah, like my whole life, my career was like 101 for him. Like, it was table stakes. He was like, yeah. So he's saying this, and he goes, okay, well, if you're going to grow by 5 times in 3 years, that's a lot. Do you know how to run a business that size? And he let me answer, but obviously he already knew the answer, which was no, because every day that WumDrop got bigger was the biggest business I had ever run. This was the first business I had ever run. And so we had a pretty frank discussion about the fact that if I could be someone who was a leader that was able to articulate the vision of the business and influence folks, he would teach me about management, because there are other portions of the job that I didn't even know about. I didn't know anything about management really, or at least I did have some management practices that I was putting in place without knowing about management. And to scale a business, you need good management. So we agreed that if we have to take the business here, there in the video. And for the listeners, I'm saying higher. If we have to take the business higher, and we're currently at a point that's lower, we need to go find people that have already run businesses at the point that we want to get to, articulate the vision to them, inspire them, and influence them to come back and join us to take it there. And he backed me to be the guy to head up a team of people who knew more than me to take us to a point that he needed us to get to. And so we started with organizational design of the business because that wasn't ever really robustly formalized. We broke it down into 4 very simple categories, very, very simple, because we combined product and technology. So we had finance, operations, product and technology, and growth. And even combining growth, combining like marketing and sales, also very simple. So it was a recognition of the fact that the business was still in a very immature place. And then we recruited 4 leaders for that space, and we did a flipping good job of that, with one exception being the growth space. So we'll go back to this, but if I have any regrets in the business, it's that I didn't ever nail the foundation of a really strong growth team. The business grew by itself and by dint of how fabulous the operations and the technology and finance practices were. But by the time I left, I was never able to say that I grew a really strong growth team, and I would like to do that with my next business. But nevertheless, we established these 4 pieces, and we got great leaders. And the business instantly transformed by virtue of having folks who knew better ways of working, significantly more competent in all of those particular areas. And the business began to go from growing at 50% to going into the 80s and 90s and 100s. And Sylvester was throwing huge volume at us from MassMart, and also made the decision at that point that if we're going to be doing this, that Walmart needed to be all in, and that the business needed to be 100% acquired. And so that was my exit opportunity. And so I got bought out, and so did Roy's remaining shareholding. And so the business was 100% owned from then on. That was 2021. And I was given a 3-year earnout. And I was like, sweet, I've nailed it. But that was the beginning of the 3 most challenging, nutritious, and rewarding learning years that I've had in business ever. Because Sylvester kicked my ass to ribbons in the first 6 months. Walmart has a brand that is authentic, that they are family oriented, and they're Midwestern, but they're the biggest retailer in the world for a reason, because they're uncompromising on excellence. And so is every officer that works for that business, and they're proud of it. And Sylvester was proud of it, and he demanded it of his reports too. And I was now his direct report. I was made a MassMart officer, which was cool. I was the most junior member of the officers meeting, probably. And so I got to see how leadership worked at a listed corporate, which was then delisted with Walmart's complete purchase of MassMart at the same time. But in the first 6 months, excuse me, in the first 6 months, he drove me relentlessly to transform our ways of working, to implement robust management practices, and bring the company up to snuff in terms of Walmart standards. And the company was not, because, and this was critical, this is the most important lesson I think I learned from him, apart from remaining teachable, which is how I was even able to onboard this stuff, is the difference between management and leadership. Because none of us as entrepreneurs are told by mainstream resources the importance of this difference. A lot, and I think rightly so, a lot of credit is given to entrepreneurs just for being brave enough to try things. And so a hell of a lot of emphasis is placed on natural charisma and leadership. And that is very, very important. But it is absolutely not the most important thing, and you cannot succeed with that alone. You will eventually, you'll create so much friction, you'll have so much friction unless you know the frameworks, that you will eventually either run out of money, or you will quit. In both cases, the business stops, right? And he taught me the critical importance of vision and influence, thinking about those two things as leadership, really. So articulating a vision and a mission, and then influencing people to believe in it and want to join it. That's leadership. But if you're an executive, there are so many more management things beneath that are equally important. Okay, you have the vision and the mission, and you've influenced people to be excited by it. Congrats. You are a leader. Now, how does it actually happen? Well, you need to articulate.
Now you need to execute.
And this is the beginning of management frameworks. You need to articulate a strategy, right? You need to be taught how to articulate a strategy, because from a strategy flows your structure, and from your structure flow what resources do you require, what muscles do you need to put on the bone to make the structure work and to be able to execute the strategy. And then on a day-to-day basis, in terms of the friction that you're encountering, how do you correctly identify what are the roadblocks that threaten your ability to acquire resources in order to implement your structure to execute on your strategy? And so how do you determine what you're spending your time on? And if you don't know that if you're just kind of like scattergun dealing with problems, and you're not correctly filtering for the roadblocks that affect those things because you understand the management frameworks, you are at best, like I said earlier, with sales, at best going to get lucky, but consistently probably not. And you'll be frustrated and your business will go slower or die. And I didn't know any of that. And I didn't know the frameworks for implementing those things. And the learning curve was so strong, I thought I was going to break my neck for the first 6 months. And I was again entering a place of like, it was gnarly because I was older and I knew more, and I'd been through kind of a couple of cycles of this before, but I was entering a stage of feeling quite emotional and wondering whether he trusted me or not. But I began to show signs that I was learning, and then that I was implementing. And then it was weird. It was like over a couple of months or weeks, I felt like I'd grown these muscles and I could do stuff. And the business began to hum and really thrive. And Sylvester saw both the willingness to learn and also the fact that the business was coming together in a really robust way. And our relationship switched to I would call it like a challenging partner-teacher kind of relationship. The trust was extremely deep. I never felt like he was ever trying to screw me. I always felt like he was incredibly on my side. And the reality was that he was always on my side. But I just was going through a learning curve where I was doubting myself and, trying to externalize it probably. And he became an incredibly important champion for us inside both MassMart and Walmart. MassMart e-commerce became established as a thing under his tenure, and we flourished. And our ability to do what we do at enormous scales radically changed. Like the first year that he was there, we have inside any retail servicing business, peak is anything from Black Friday to Christmas. The first year that we were there, we had so much volume thrown at us, we fell over, and operations were bad, and it dented our credibility slightly in 2021. By July, August 2022, we were doing peak volumes every single day without breaking a sweat. Like it was just Tuesday. It was the rate at which we scaled our ability to handle growth was incredible. And the team, I will always be grateful and amazed by my team that I had, that they did that. Unbelievable job. And I've been out of the business now. My earnout ended after 3 years in April. At the end of April, and I've been out of the business since then. So at the rate at which we were growing, I'm sure that it's that there's been a similar jump this year from April to September, and that they're continuing to do that kind of work. But the leaders that are in place, that I put in place, are still there. And in fact, our head of operations, Lauren, who was previously the CEO of Starbucks before she joined us, is now running WumDrop. It was brilliant that she was able to succeed me. So, and the point is, those leaders were in the room when Sylvester was teaching me the stuff, and he was teaching them that stuff too. So, yeah, like there's a lot of we get credit for being teachable on the one hand, but flipping hell, it's nice to be taught by Walmart. Like not everybody gets the opportunity to be taught by Walmart, and so the stuff that we were taught was unbelievable and of huge value. And I left in April and was able to leave because of fulfillment, because I felt like this business is WumDrop. I felt like WumDrop 1.0 was done, and I had made a good thing, and my team had made a good thing, and I was able to go and do something else. And that's why I was able to go. I feel good about it.
That's amazing, Simon. Thank you for sharing all that. It was also extremely validating for me, and I think you'll probably like this. It's also part of the hard point of your awareness of what you've been through and what your business needed. The difficulty with Metavolve and us is that we are coming to the market at the earliest possible point of when all of these things are needed, and I'll list them shortly. But having that trust and having that awareness that these are required is the biggest uphill battle we've encountered. That I know once we unlock our opportunities for scale, our total accessible market is the world. And it's just about being able to unlock that, but unlocking that through trust, awareness, and education of the market. And right now, Metavolve only does strategy development, right? Just because it's ironically simpler. Strategy is the most complex thing you can ever really do. But the point is, from a business perspective, as one service, it's simpler than what we were previously. Because what we did previously was strategy development, organizational design, leadership and management hiring support, team development, and then growth partnership, where we would essentially come in to supplement your management team as you're scaling this and start building processes, systems, structure, all like together with psychometric assessments, hiring these specialists, hiring these leaders. We stopped doing all of that except for the strategies, just simply it was too complex of a business to build from the early stages. And from a hiring perspective, business model perspective, we want to really get away from time and materials. All of that was there. And the reason is because we were aware of what businesses needed in terms of these scaling journeys. Because like there's the one point that we spoke about earlier in terms of the difficulty and transition of burning out when it's kind of you on your own and trying to figure out how is it that I can get these systems in place to get this thing running where I can focus on growth. Now there's the next point of putting together my leadership team for the first perspective, and now stepping up quite truly into more of a CEO role and being able to establish that and have and empower people to be able to do so. And now your point around the difference between leadership and management is that, especially then, that's what we've been focused so hard on doing with our methodology and our offering, is to help you develop a strategy that's easy to understand, easy to articulate, and easy to execute. And the point is, we could never do that if we were strategy consultants, telling people this is what your strategy should be. We're not experts on the business, but the point there is like, how is it we download and consolidate and integrate all of this language and thinking that you have about your business, your market, your advantages, your customer experience, how you're going to grow, what your vision is, your long-term goals, all of that into a document that our clients essentially predominantly use for, besides the quarterly update and reflection of their strategy and their town halls that they have, is onboarding. This, if you want to understand, here's a 15-page document, right, that it understands in spoken English around what is our market, why do our customers buy from us, what's our advantage, what's our current growth strategy that we're trying to employ, what's our SWOT that we're dealing with, what's the vision, and our approach to vision is also purpose statement, mission statement, 4 sentences around what that vision, that mission looks like in action, that is the birthplace of long-term goal setting, and then the final one-liner vision of what we're doing this all for. And the point there is then it goes into what needs to be true for that vision to become a reality. And then those are the long-term goals. And that is essentially what then gets distributed among the leadership team. So everyone has their goals that they need to achieve moving forward. The next point is then obviously the next year, quarterly objectives and how we're going to execute that. But that's not the point. Just speaking to your points around leadership. And this is what the amazing fulfillment that I get in terms of the way that we're working with the people that we have the privilege of working with, is this the confidence that they share around their assertiveness as a leader, specifically stemming from this clarity of vision and direction that they're able to articulate in a conversation, and the fact that that document is just an asset to use for reviewing purposes and for onboarding purposes, but it's just deeply understood And because of that, it's able to be conveyed and explained in a way that I don't have to copy paste the words as they're written. I can just explain it till you get it because it's that clear for me. And it's that leveling up of leadership that allows for that perspective where they're able to move themselves and their business forward. And just to your point of one thing that I still really want to be able to see for Metavolve is all of the complexity that's required to put a business together in terms of from a scaling perspective and putting a leadership team in there. There's so much support required to do so that I know we have the skill set to be able to provide. And I hope, I intend that in time we're able to be able to provide more of that. But right now, the biggest thing that we're able to do is help you articulate a very clear and comprehensive strategy for your business that will take you through these life cycle stages, and then gives the perspective and strategic focus to implement a lot of these changes oneself. And so just from your story of everything from the experiences that you went through to the learnings that you made at Walmart, these massive learning curves, being coachable, being teachable, what you had to change within your business has been amazing to hear, but honestly really validating for me around the problem that we're solving. Because again, I go back to right now, we know we're problem solution fit, but that product market fit is elusive. And being able to find and like unlock this growth within the market, I still have these moments of self-doubt and wondering what's going on. And just a thank you to you that this conversation was really validating to me. And I'm assuming from the audience, it's also people that are in it, hopefully feeling a lot less alone because you're speaking to someone, Simon, who's gone through just the absolute rungs of the ladder that just never ends in terms of growth and scale. So thank you from me. I guess thank you also on behalf of the audience. This has been a truly enlightening and very in-depth, vulnerable, honest, authentic conversation, Simon. So I'm just very grateful for you being willing to have this conversation and sharing so openly about your journey.
It's such a pleasure. It's helpful for me to talk about it and reflect on stuff too. I appreciate the time.
For sure. So I think just before we wrap up, it's just there's two questions I really have left. And the first one is, now that you've post-exit, right, living there in the bush, what does the next 6 to 18 months look like for you?
I don't know. I've taken some time to I think scratch an itch, which is to put my money where my mouth is on being optimistic about South Africa. So I've bought property across the breadth of it. I bought a place in Cape Town. I bought some land in the Karoo, and where I am now, I've bought a house in Hoedspruit, which is next to the Kruger Park. So having grown up in Durban, this kind of bush and environment just like kind of feels like home. So I'm scratching the itch of being in an environment that feels home on like a childhood level, but also is next to a place that is one of the best places in the world that we have in our country, which is the Kruger. And the same is true of buying a place in Cape Town, which is one of the best places in the world, and same with the Karoo. And I've been obviously very happy doing things like moving shelves and painting walls and stuff like that. But I do know that my latent urge to create stuff is going to result in me starting something again. I don't know what it will be. I will be very surprised if it's in deliveries, because one of the things that I learned about that is that they're very hard. And I don't think I necessarily need to do that again, but I will want to make something again for sure. The urge isn't so overwhelming yet that I'm sitting with a whiteboard and doodling stuff out. But give me 2 weeks, and it probably will. It's just kind of how I am. But I'm right now. I'm enjoying making pictures with photographs. I'm enjoying making homes, and just spending a little bit more time thinking and reflecting.
Sounds like a great place to be, and sounds like an interesting interlude chapter, I'd say, in the business story of things. I think for you, in a personal point, I think it's a beautiful place to be. Simon, finally, what is the one question that I haven't asked you, that I should have asked you, that you'd like to answer now?
Jeepers, Cam. Could have thrown that one to me earlier. Surprise first. Okay, here's one. If I was to do this all again, would I change anything? No. there was so much suffering and so much friction and relationships lost and regained along the way. But the result of who I am now is such a rich forest floor of fallen leaves that are creating quite a nice compost that I'm really happy with that. And I can't conceive of how I would have gotten to where I am now without all the thousands of layers of experiences that I had along the way. And I'm definitely a better version of myself for having started this business, for having explored all the bad versions of myself and working through them. And I have absolutely no doubt that I don't know what I don't know in terms of all the other bad habits that I need to solve. But, we're all a work in progress. But I can't conceive of a better outcome, and I'm happy.
Awesome. Simon, thank you for your raw honesty, and thank you for being the person that you are and that you've become from those experiences. I love the fact that you've been able to integrate that into seemingly quite a healthy identity. So well done for what you've been able to achieve. Good luck for what you are yet to achieve, and may you continue to embrace a lot of fulfillment, joy, and learning along the journey. Thank you for being on the Founder Files.
Thank you so much. Just come.
What an unbelievable story we just heard from Simon, and I'm so grateful to have heard that. But throughout that, it's just highlighted so many difficult experiences and periods. And this is where I want to shout out to you as the audience, is that if you have gone through or going through periods of losing clients, struggling with burnout, not having the clarity and confidence for where you're headed, dealing with redesigning a business for the first time, having to invest in new capabilities or putting in leadership, it's just all this chaos that comes with entrepreneurship, then I think it's time that you need to have a conversation with me so that you can figure out how you can scale more sustainably and take the chaos out of this environment. Our strategy development program is deliberately built for entrepreneurs like you who want to take the chaos out of scaling their businesses. We've taken many of our clients through this journey, whether that's quadrupling their business within 9 months after completing our program, or going from plateauing to increasing revenue by 25% and net profit by 63% whilst taking a 2-week holiday. The results are there for all of our clients, whether you're plateauing, whether it's chaotic and doing that. But the point is that they're able to have still the peace of mind and the freedom to do what they want with their time in between. My team will take you through a structured approach and process to help you not only overcome your scaling issues, but also create a holistic strategy tailored for your business. A strategy that's easier for your team to understand, talk about, and execute. By the end of it, you and your team will have a clear roadmap to grow faster and more sustainably. And we're so confident about the value that we provide that if after 3 sessions you don't see the impact, you'll get all your money back. Now, are you ready to grow your business more sustainably? Well, then visit metavolve.co to book a 30-minute introductory call with me to see how we can help you take the chaos out of scaling. And remember, before you go, like, comment, share this podcast with your network so other people like you can receive incredibly valuable stories from entrepreneurs like Simon. So until next time, cheers for now.